February 14th agenda. We'll need the approval of the January invoices.
Mr. Chairman, I would move approval of the January invoices.
Okay, we got a motion by Mr. Smith.
I second.
Second by Ms. Mizell. All in favor? Say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Okay. B, approval of the January 10th, 2019 minutes. Should all have a copy in front of you. If you've had a chance, take a chance, read those. I'll need a motion to approve and
I make a motion to approve the January 2nd, not 2nd,
okay.
10th, minutes.
Motion by Ms. Mizell
I'll second.
and second by Mr. Caldwell. All in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Okay. Approval of the February 14th agenda. And I think we had some additions. Audit report,
Yes,
which was C under other business.
yes,
And anything else?
that's it. Just
Okay.
acceptance of the fiscal year 17-18 audit.
So audit report fiscal year 17-18 audit. So I need a motion.
I so move.
So motion by Mr. Mifflin
I second.
and second by Mrs. Mizell. All in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Okay, D, items for postponement or withdrawal. Looks like we've got under new business, PSP 2019-01 Cherry Blossom Village, Phase 9 has been postponed. So if anybody's here for that, PSP 2019-01 Cherry Blossom Village, Phase 9 has been postponed. Anything else, Joe? Okay, so and then under commission business consent agenda, is B eligible? I think we discussed that a little on Monday.
I believe
Okay,
it came to
so-
the conclusion it was.
Okay, so PSP 2019-02 and PDP 2019-03, which is the South Crossing Phase 1 preliminary subdivision plat request for 166 residential and open space lots and preliminary development plan request for 140 apartment units in 5 buildings on 66.45 acres zoned R2 PUD medium density residential and C1 conservation located on south side of McClellan Circle. Is anybody here against this application?
Anybody here want to hear it?
Anybody want to hear this application? Okay, so this one is consent eligible. I'd need a motion.
I make a motion.
So Mrs. Mizell makes the motion to approve
I'll second.
and second it by Mr. Caldwell. So Mizell and Caldwell, all in, do we need a?
No.
Okay, so all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
And anybody opposed? Okay, passes. If the applicant's here, there you go, Rory. Okay, so that one went consent. All right, and then under old business, Tri-Village Storage. Wow. Everybody's here. Yeah, everybody is. John Jones is gone. Mr. Stone, Regina. Go ahead, Matt, I'm sorry.
Oh, no, you're fine. This is a preliminary development plan.
Oh, before you start, everybody,
Yes.
keep in mind, we all have loved ones at home, and it's a special day today, so let's not go on all night long. Thank you.
No problem.
Swear everybody in.
And yes, Charlie, would you swear everybody in before we get started? Matt, thanks.
Everyone signed in to speak tonight, if you would, could please stand and raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm the statement you're to make to be the truth to the best of your information and belief? Thank you.
Thanks, Charlie. Go ahead, Matt.
All right, thank you. This is a preliminary development plan for a self-storage facility. There's a 400 square foot office proposed with this, and a little over 51,000 square feet of actual storage building. The location of this project is at 250 Connector Road. The zoning on the property is B2. It's our highway commercial district, and the surrounding properties are either zone. Most of them are zoned B2 across Connector Road. There's a property that's currently zoned A1. This site is just under 2.8 acres in size, and is served by an access road that runs along the west side of Connector Road. This is just, I guess, for everyone's information, this is an aerial photo showing roughly the current conditions on the project site. As you can see, there was previously a used car sales approved on this site, roughly 10 years ago. That's since been out of business, and the site's been unused largely for several years now. The zoning on the site, as I mentioned, it is Zone B2. It's outlined here in the blue color, and then on the other side of Connector Road, kind of catty corner, is some agriculturally zoned property. This is, I guess, a look at the preliminary development plan that you all are considering tonight. I'm going to kind of go through this in the same order that the staff report goes through it. I guess before I get into it, I did want to just mention there was a preliminary development plan that was approved for this site back in November of 2017. Some of you were on the planning commission at that time, so I just want to make sure that everyone who wasn't also sort of is brought up to speed on that. It was for roughly a similar development. The applicant proposed changes to that site that it was determined that the sum of those changes constituted a major change. Our procedure in that case is to have the applicant file an application and for it to go through our TRC and through the notification process as if it was a new application. So that's sort of why it's being heard by us tonight. As far as the setbacks on the property, the B2 zone requires a 50-foot front setback. They're allowed to do 0-foot setbacks on the side and the rear, as long as the adjoining properties are also zoned commercial. In this case, they are. In this instance, the property technically has double frontage since the interstate is on the western side, so that's why they show a 50-foot setback on the front and the rear, is because technically the zoning ordinance considers this a double frontage lot, even though it doesn't have access to the interstate. The applicant is showing, and I kind of called it out here, and you can see it on your plans that you have with your packets. The applicant is proposing to set the buildings back 2.5 feet from the property lines. They mentioned that on the staff report. I did want to also point out, and I kind of go through this in the staff report. It's not, I would say, uncommon for development plans to come through at the preliminary stage and possibly show a 0-foot setback, and then if that plan is approved, for them to work with their neighbors to try to figure out some sort of long-term maintenance or construction accesses with those adjoining property owners. If they're not able to come to an agreement, then at that time it's probably appropriate for them to scoot those buildings back away from the property line, just so that they have the ability to maintain those buildings going forward. They can construct them without potentially trespassing on a neighbor's property. This one and the next slide these are images that the applicant provided. They can talk about this more when it comes to their portion to speak, but they wanted to demonstrate to the commission that this 2.5-foot setback that they've, I guess, proposed moving their buildings back does provide them with enough space to construct and maintain their building. So in this image, they're demonstrating that this provides them with enough space to have a ladder. There could be some painting. They could possibly hang the metal on the buildings, that type of a thing. And then this image is there to demonstrate that they could potentially maintain a grass strip through this area. There's it would be a wide enough space for them to have a lawnmower and for a person to fit. The access to this site is provided from an access road, a private access road that sort of has 2 connection points to Connector Road. This is the sort of an image that I clipped from a 2006 plat that sort of laid out a maintenance agreement. I just wanted to call this out. I'm not making this a condition of approval, but there have been enough questions and concerns over this access road over the years that I do recommend that the applicants find the time to sit down with their neighbors, and they all can discuss and hopefully come to an agreement on a formal agreement as far as how to maintain the access road and the access easement, and what types of uses may or may not be appropriate in that access easement. It'll hopefully help them all to get along much better. The subdivision and development regulations require that entrances to commercial sites be either a quarter of the width of the property frontage or a maximum of 40 feet, whichever is, I guess, smaller. In this instance, 40 feet would be appropriate. So the applicant actually has 3 entrances that they're proposing to their site. The main 2 entrances, I would say the entrances that would provide access to the interior of the site, both meet our width requirement. The applicant, or this development plan, would require approval of a variance for this sort of central entrance. I've labeled it on this slide as tentatively 71 feet. I've spoken to the applicants, and they think that it probably is more accurately close to 64 feet. Once again, I can kind of let them address that during their portion. So I just wanted to note here, though, that a variance would be required to the entrance width if you were to approve this application. Parking for the project site, the applicant has designated a couple of spots for formal striped parking spaces. There's a handicap spot that they're proposing here. There's 5 parking spaces that they're proposing here, one of which appears to be handicap as well. And then there's 2 parking spaces that they're proposing back in this location. I've highlighted this area as well. I think it would probably be better if these parking spaces were located here. Either location, would work fine. I think the applicant is okay with moving those parking spaces here. I think the other location works a little bit better, just in terms of getting potential parked vehicles. Well, I mean, I guess it would be in the easement either way, but it's in, I guess, a more out of the way area for those vehicles to be fit. Also, I wanted to note the applicant is proposing a sidewalk here along the front of the building. That front of the building will provide access not only for the people to get from the parking spaces to the office building, which is proposed down in this corner, but that sidewalk would also provide a means for people to get from parked vehicles to these storage units that would be accessed from the front here. The subdivision and development regulations, I pulled a quote out here from section 1000 G1 that says all developments shall be required to provide adequate pedestrian access to parking lots, off-site sidewalks, and facilities commonly used by residents. This is a section of our subregs that comes from just general circulation guidelines when it comes to new development, whether it's commercial or residential, I guess in some cases even industrial. Basically, it's trying to promote pedestrian accessibility throughout the community. It's not specifically related to residential or commercial property. It's just residents, as in residents of Georgetown. As far as landscaping, there's a number of landscaping requirements, as I'm sure you are all familiar. This property does comply with our property perimeter landscaping requirements. This area back here is being provided to comply with. We have a section of our ordinance that requires that if your property has double frontage and one of those frontages is an arterial road that you don't have direct access to, there's a certain level of screening that you have to provide there, and that's being shown in that landscaping buffer. As far as our VUA perimeter requirements, we do require that all vehicular use areas be screened from public and private rights of way, access roads, access easements, things like that, as well as adjoining properties. And that's sort of what the applicant is attempting to accomplish with this. There is a variance or a waiver that would be required for them to do this. Typically, this landscaping would directly screen their parking spaces from the private access road. they don't really seem to have the space to accomplish that with their proposed plan, so they are requesting a waiver for this landscaping to be located here rather than, somewhere here where it would screen the VUA from the access road. They're instead proposing to screen the VUA and the access road from Connector Road. The other area where a VUA perimeter comes into play is the applicant would need to provide some screening in this small area where they've got the gap in Building E, so that that gap was created so that they could reroute the stormwater pipe through Building E without it going underneath the building, where it would be difficult or impossible to maintain. The applicant is agreeable to providing additional landscaping in that buffer. I've talked to them about that. The parking areas that they're proposing with this plan measured out to about or just under 3,500 square feet. And the applicant is proposing to provide roughly 2,000 square feet of interior landscaping. Sort of in this area here, there's another little landscaping island here. There's an island that they're proposing here, and then another island down here on the south side. Technically, interior VUA landscaping is only required if you achieve a threshold of either 6,000 square feet or 20 parking spaces. They're not really proposing either. So the interior landscaping that they're proposing is fine. And then the last is canopy requirements. And I've talked to the applicant about this. Their development is roughly 2 large trees short of meeting our canopy requirements of 24% for a commercial site. And they're agreeable to providing those additional trees. As far as stormwater, the applicant does have a basin in the back that they're proposing for stormwater maintenance for their site. I think it also provides some detention for some of the adjoining sites as well. And then, as I briefly mentioned earlier, the applicant is proposing to reroute the storm pipe through their site in a different way than it currently runs, just so it doesn't sort of adversely impact their developable area. And I know there's been some discussion about the easement and things of that nature. And I would say if you have any questions, Charlie might be able to better explain it than I. I know we've had some discussions via email with the city attorney on that, and I think the applicant's attorney has also been included on those. So just, I guess, kind of a little bit of well, before I get to this, I did want to mention, as I did earlier at our workshop meeting, there is I guess it was discovered that there is a cemetery on the site. A exploratory dig last week did find human remains, and then the applicants this week have started, I guess, a dig to sort of determine the boundaries of that area, so that we can be sure, what areas need to be protected and things of that nature. I haven't heard from the applicants as far as, what's been discovered this week. I have, I guess, seen some pictures from some of the neighbors on that, but I haven't heard from the applicants on this. So I think if you all have questions about the cemetery and how the digs this week have been going, it might be appropriate, or you'll get better information from them than you would from me. But I did want to let you all know that. As far as this application and kind of how it meets our regs, maybe just a little bit in comparison to the plan that you all heard back in November of 2017. The applicants have sort of reoriented the parking in a different way than they had in the previous plan. The way that the parking spaces are faced and the access is to the site, it should result in a reduction or possibly an elimination of vehicles that would be backing out directly into the access road. I think that provides for a safer means for people to get into and out of the site. The applicants are proposing to move the buildings in from the side property lines. Some, like I said, they can try to demonstrate to you all that, the amounts that they've moved it in will be sufficient for them to maintain those buildings long term. The applicant is, I've talked to them about sort of the cemetery issue that I mentioned earlier. They are prepared to, obviously follow all state regulations as far as what needs to be done with the cemetery and remains that are discovered in that site. Whether that's going through the correct channels to possibly have those remains moved, or whether they need to, I guess, sort of fence off the area, protect it from any construction, and provide permanent access to the site. I think their preference is to try to relocate, but they're willing to comply with all appropriate regulations when it comes to that. They have sort of reduced the variance that they're requesting as far as the changes to the entrance width. For those of you who were here on the commission in November of 2017, you'll remember that at that time what they were looking for was basically open ingress egress across the entire frontage of their property. They have kind of changed their layout somewhat, so now we've got two very well defined entrances that meet our requirements, and then the variance that they're requesting, instead of it being some 300 feet, it's now down to approximately 65 feet. So that is an improvement over their previous plan. That being said, there are still 3 variances that I note here and in the staff report that are required for this application. There is the variance to reduce their parking. I support that variance. I think that our parking requirements that we have for self-storage facilities is excessive. The majority of people using these facilities are not looking for, a striped parking space that they can park in and then carry their, whatever they're trying to store, back to a storage facility. They're going to park in front of their storage unit and unload their equipment there. The applicant is still proposing, as I mentioned, a variance to increase the maximum width of a street entrance to a commercial site. And they are looking for a waiver to relocate that VUA perimeter screening that would have normally been between the parking area and the access road. As I mentioned before, they're looking to move that between the access road and connector road. With that being said, I did include some conditions that if you all do approve this application, I did put I guess nine conditions. I ended up adding one more condition after the staff report was completed. It's not anything that's unusual. I did add condition 9 that we've been adding to I guess all of our preliminary development plan applications, just making the applicants aware that there is a sunset clause. If work doesn't start within 2 years, they either lose their preliminary approval or they can file for an extent or apply for an extension. So that's the condition that I added. All the other conditions are the same as what's in your staff reports. And that's all that I had.
Okay, so the applicant?
I've got a question.
Oh, sure, sorry, questions for Matt, I apologize.
What is the purpose of providing a linkage to off-site sidewalks when there aren't any off-site sidewalks there?
So, I guess the sidewalks have to start somewhere. I guess there was a certain time when there were probably no sidewalks in Georgetown. Somebody has to build the first sidewalk. And so that's really what it is when sites redevelop, we ask for sidewalks to be put in to improve the pedestrian connectivity. Sort of in this same area, if you'll remember, we did ask, forgetting the name of Bluegrass RV to put in sidewalks, and I believe they complied with that, where the state would allow them to put in sidewalks around the corner, or they're in the process of putting sidewalks in, I believe. I don't think they've finished. Yeah, they haven't finished with their site yet.
All right, thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
Anybody else have questions for Matthew? Okay, thanks, Matt. The applicant like to speak?
Chairman, members of the commission, my name is Harold Sims. I represent Brexton Construction LLC, construction company out of Columbus, Ohio. They have worked with Georgetown now for since 2017, as you've heard. But I won't belabor it too much, but the project did go through an application for a much similar plan in 2017, received an approval of this commission with 4 variances granted on the commission. There were 7 conditions. One of the conditions required us to obtain written consent from our neighbors regarding our proposed use of the access road, primarily because at the time I think staff was concerned with the safety of backing of cars. We showed our parking basically perpendicular to the access road as opposed to parallel to the access road, which would have had cars backing out into the access road. We were unable to get approval or written consent from our neighbors on that condition, and when we showed up at the end of 2018, asking that the requirement for the condition 7 be removed from our approval, because we had proposed a modification to the plan that would make our parking along the access road parallel to the access road to at that point where cars would not be backing out, and the safety concern that led to condition 7 was eliminated with the parallel parking as opposed to the perpendicular parking. That led to consideration of any number of non-condition 7 related issues, setbacks, the visibility effect on our neighbors, many issues that were totally unrelated to condition number 7, and we met with that. It was decided we would try to have a meeting with the other side to work something out. That was unable. We came to the January meeting, and it was determined that we were continued till tonight. We worked with staff subsequent to that and proposed an amended plan, and that's what's before you tonight is an amendment to the plan that you already approved in 2017. Those amendments, which the staff briefly touched on, is the confirmation of the parallel parking as opposed to perpendicular parking. We have also modified the entrance to the plan to address the wide, the 316-foot entrance that was considered when the plan was initially proposed, to now we have a clearly defined entrances with landscaping and directions to show the entrances. We moved the gates for the entrance to the actual parking area back considerably back, so there's no chance that there will be stacking that would stack. If somebody comes in with a SUV and a long trailer, they're not going to be sticking out into the access road, because we moved our gate significantly back that will accommodate a vehicle with a trailer behind it. We, at that point in time, the issue of the cemetery came forward, and we using the rough outline of the 2006 plat for the car wash that identified the location of the cemetery, we started to deal with that issue. Brief history for that from my client's standpoint, before I got involved, before they purchased the property, they had an ALTA survey performed, which was the most thorough type of survey you can get in the preparation of buying a property. And our Alta survey indicated expressly that there was no evidence of a cemetery on the property. With that in mind, they moved forward with their, that they had title insurance to cover that issue. They moved forward with the purchase of the property. When we found out through the letter submitted to the Planning Commission by Attorney Langford from Ms. Offutt, addressing the issue that there was some evidence in previous history of a cemetery, we started to deal with the issue, retained the services of an archaeologist who gave us some instruction on how to move forward, followed the archaeologist's instructions, retained the services of the local, of our county, elected county coroner, who had to bring in a licensed embalmer and assist with a controlled dig. And at that point in time, after we had done a sonar and it went down to, one report says 3.5 feet, another report we have says 5 feet. Nothing was found on either of those sonar reports, but because there was concern over that wasn't deep enough, we decided to engage the service of the coroner and the licensed embalmer to do the controlled dig. At about 63 inches, I believe the report reads, the human remains were found, and the coroner gave instructions to put the remains back into the earth, and it was covered up, and we investigated what were the proper procedures for moving forward. One of the things we needed to do was to find the perimeters of the cemetery, and that process was undertaken earlier this week. The coroner has now issued a report indicating the giving some description of the remains found and the approximate perimeter of the area that he found the remains in. Basically, it amounted to a controlled dig going down about 6 inches and sifting, and he kept expanding the area until, in his determination, that he wasn't finding any further evidence of human remains or another grave. With that in mind, my client is prepared to do all things necessary required under the Kentucky Revised Statutes to provide proper notice and go through the procedures of getting approval from the Scott County Fiscal Court to do a removal and a reinterment in a what's certified or registered cemetery with appropriate markers at our expense. So we have marked off that area of our plat, and in case that it was larger, we were going to make a decision on whether to leave them in place or remove. At this point in time, I think is their intent to follow the procedures for removal, and that area will not be disturbed until that approval is received. We will mark a perimeter surrounding that area, and it will be undisturbed per the coroner's instructions until we actually move forward. Getting back to the actual plan, I want to bring to your attention that this is the same plan with except for conditions that address concerns of some of our neighbors. We didn't really, we are in a zone that was approved for 0 lot lines. Our plan, it took advantage of that and has a proposal for a project that had a 0 lot lines. Trying to work with the neighbors, the applicant put the pencil to the paper and felt like they could legitimately give up a 2.5 foot perimeter around that, and the applicant is prepared to go more in depth tonight to embellish upon what staff has already shown you, is that it is the opinion of the applicant and their engineers that they can build this property on the 2.5 inch setback line, that they can maintain the property in their area around it, all within the 2.5 foot setback. That is 2.5 feet more than the plan requires. As it relates to the front setback, the setback from Connector Road that's imposed by this zone is 50 feet. The nearest building that we have to the front line is 65 feet. At the rear, because of being double facing, we have a 50-foot setback. I would note for the commission that a good portion of the rear of our property is that basically serves as a regional retention area. It takes that water that goes through that stormwater easement. You see there's and so it takes all the water from our property and all the water from adjoining properties. And what's basically outlined in blue at the rear of our property, that's all basically a retention area. And so we are, but we're still well within the setback on that area as well, and out of the retention zone. The commission, when this commission approved this project in 2017, imposed that condition upon us that we get the neighbors' written consent. It's my opinion, one that's not necessarily shared by Charlie, that basically amounted to a improper delegation of your authority to third parties. Charlie's opinion is that because this involved access to the private service road, the case law that I'm referring to isn't necessarily applicable. He and I will have to agree on that for this purpose of this discussion. I don't think it needs to be resolved by this commission tonight, but I do think imposing upon an applicant the obligation to get permission from an adjoining owner as a condition of approval is not permissible under the circumstances. Nevertheless, we made changes to the plan that address that. We've gone in, as I've said, and we've moved we've reconfigured the parking that eliminated the need for condition number 7. We have addressed the VUA perimeter opening across the front. What you originally saw and granted a variance on was 316 feet. We've now condensed that down to our numbers are closer to 64 feet. Staff has it at 71, but we've eliminated it. You approved 316, and now we're only seeking an approval for that middle part that's 71 feet. The amount of traffic that is going to and from our site is probably the lowest of any type of use outside of a cell tower that you would have. I think the numbers estimate 5 or 6 trips a day to a storage facility. So it's not like this is going to be a movie theater or a doctor's or dentist's office that people are going to all the time. And the service road is certainly capable of handling our traffic. As I'm going to let some of our other people on our team speak with you all about different portions of this plan, but it's my belief that this commission has approved a plan that was had more impact on adjoining properties and had 4 variances in it. We've improved the plan, addressed concerns of our neighbors, are prepared to handle the cemetery with utmost respect according to Kentucky law, and we're prepared to move forward. I would like to let other members of our plan step forward and talk about the actual use of the setback area, so the commission is satisfied with how the 2.5-foot setback works in terms of construction and maintenance. And we'll be back unless anybody has any questions about the stuff I've covered at this time.
Anybody have questions for the applicant? I do have a quick question, and you may not answer it. It may be Mr. Craig there. During the dig of the cemetery, you mentioned that John Goebel, after you start finding human remains, said put them back and then kind of cover it up. Did you also uncover gravestones or tombstones? My understanding.
Craig was there for the whole time.
Oh, okay.
I do not think
so
that happened.
I'll save it for Craig then.
Okay.
Or Craig, if you want to come up.
Okay.
Craig Abbott with Brexton. Yeah, I was there for both digs. February 5th, we did the exploratory dig just to find out, is there a cemetery there? We got down to 63 inches, found a couple bone fragments. He said, stop, fill it in, and we moved on. Subsequent to that, I had two options. Do I to dig up, find the perimeter of the cemetery and leave it, or figure out the process to exhume and reinter? So we, on Tuesday, the 12th, we did an exploratory dig, went down to right beside where we found the remains, found a few more bone fragments at about 58 to 60 inches, and that were right adjacent to the same hole we dug. The original hole was caving in. We dug all that material out, collected all the remains that we could find, and then started moving east, west, and north from our property line until our grave digger and the funeral director both said, you're outside of anything that looks like any kind of a burial site. The coroner agreed, so we stopped, reinterred those remains.
Did
filled
the
hole.
neighbor offer to allow you to dig on his property?
He asked if we could, because we did find a couple headstone pieces. There was one projecting back on his. We had called in Bud, as you call it, the utility markings for our side only. I wasn't about to dig on the other side and find something that I hadn't called and had a marking
Okay.
for. So
All right.
that gets real expensive for me. So yeah, we did find a couple pieces of headstone. One was on ours, the rest was...
Any names, or was it even?
One had no markings on it that were legible. One we could just see a corner of it, and there was nothing legible.
Okay.
At least
Thank
not
you.
by me. Yep.
Any other questions? All right. I think Attorney Sims says there were a couple other people that wanted to speak from your team.
Jeff, you were going to talk about the...
Sure. Jeff Dietrich, I'm a civil engineer by trade, one of the design engineers for Brexton on this project. Wanted to talk quickly about the utility relocations that we're proposing on this. Existing utilities are routinely relocated based on proposed new buildings on projects. Nothing different in this situation. We have rerouted this one a couple of times to facilitate the best for the neighbors. The relocation that you see up there is, as you see, we're barely off our property, maybe 10, 15 feet off our property, well within the 20-foot wide easement that's there. To relocate that back onto our property and run it into the new detention basin that's down there. That 20-foot easement that's on there does talk about has the right of ingress and egress is hereby granted to the users of the utility easement as required to construct, maintain, et cetera, et cetera. As far as doing that work within that area, I think that Attorney Perkins, as well as the city attorney and our attorneys, all agree that that is a right within that easement to realign that storm sewer for this development. Any questions on utility relocations or easements?
Any questions from the commission? Thank you, sir. Anybody else?
Mr. Chairman, Commission, I'm Bill Geisen. I'm a lawyer with Stites and Harbison, and I, with Harold Sims, represent Brexton. I just want to address a few issues from perhaps a legal and a factual standpoint. First, we do appreciate that the staff has seen that our amended plan is an improvement from the preliminary plan that was approved back in November of 2017. The point that we want to make is that when Mr. Kane determined that there were major changes made to that preliminary plan, and he cited a specific section of the regulations, that regulation does not relate to amendments to a preliminary plan. The section, it's Article 1, Section 155, is entitled Post-Approval Amendments of Final Plans. So he applied a standard of considering it a major changes. That section does not apply to amendments of preliminary plans. Yet Mr. Mr. Kane did in fact apply that, but we are not making amendments to a final plan, which that section calls for. We made amendments to a preliminary plan, and that's why, as Mr. Sims told you, from our vantage point, we are making amendments to the preliminary plan that was approved back in November of 2017. The other, a couple other points on this setback is Mr. Sims told you and Matt told you, the setback requirements are 0. In the interest of trying to allay some of the concerns that were raised by staff, we have allotted for 2.5. I know the report, Matt recommends a 3-foot setback. That is nowhere set forth in the regulations. In fact, the regulations call for a 0-foot setback. We are willing to, I guess, accommodate some of the concerns that have been raised, and we are, in fact, willing to do the 2.5 feet. And I think from Matt's presentation that he gave to you earlier seems to be comfortable with that. The other thing I want to address is the sidewalk issue that Matt said, well, at some point in time we have to start sidewalks somewhere. The section of the regulations that he refers to, and we could pull that slide up again, relates to areas that are commonly used by residents. That's the section he refers to, and those last 4 words of that section are vitally important. This connector road, as you all know, because you've probably driven it regularly, this connector road is not a road that is commonly used by residents. So requiring Brexton to put a sidewalk on the connector road would be inappropriate, because you know as well as I that connector road is not commonly used by residents. There's cars flying by there at 50+ miles an hour, and in fact it might be dangerous to put a sidewalk there, just a few feet from the side.
There's apartments like a half a mile away from your location.
Well, I understand that. It's behind the Lowe's. I've been there, but still, the connector road where our property is, as you all well know, is not commonly used by residents. So I don't think that we should be required to put in one strip of sidewalk in the front of our property. So those are the issues that I wanted to address with you. I don't know if you have any follow-up questions, and I think that Mr. Sims may want to address.
Anybody else have
another
any
topic.
questions? Mr. Wiseman?
This sidewalk we're talking about, is that actually along connector road or in front of your buildings?
The one that Matt's talking about is in front of Connector Road.
Oh, that dark gray area along.
Well,
Right.
it's dark gray. That's the access road. The thick gray is the
Hey.
access road.
Yeah.
Yeah, he does not want a sidewalk on the access road or in front of our property. He wants it right up against the Connector Road.
I didn't understand that. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, and just to clarify, I think it's
Yeah.
that down through there.
Okay, any other questions? Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Harold, I think you may have a few more things to say.
With respect to the justification for the variances, I think Matt has indicated that he is okay with our request for a variance on the parking requirements from for the 8 that we have shown. Whether or not we, following his suggestion, we may move the one at the rear of the property to the side between the buildings, but otherwise, with regards to the number of 8 was what was approved last time, and we are proposing that again, and you approved that variance last time. With respect to the VUA requirements on the front of the property, we have proposed putting the screening on the VUA on the front side of the property in between the access road and connector road, putting in a row of hedges there that would screen the vehicular movements on our property away from connector road. What we're seeking a variance on is, I might have the pointer. is the use of a VUA in this area as well. The justification for that is that we have turned we no longer have people backing out or pulling into those spaces. We have we have a driveway through there. We have increased the amount of and have agreed with staff's recommendation to increase the amount of grassing area we were showing on the front of that property. We are proposing screening on that side of the property and would point to the commission to other buildings and other developments on Connector Road that have not been subjected to the requirement to have the VUA screening between their property and the access road, and they don't have it between the access road and the connector road. Pepe's Mexican restaurant, for instance, has zero screening in front of their property, and in fact has parking spaces that back out into the connector road. They are perpendicular to the building, just like we amended our plan to avoid. Our traffic will be coming in and will be going north and south. Headlights from our project will not be heading out into the access road until they come out at an angle out of the parking spaces.
I don't think so.
Okay. The Pepe's being, point to Pepe's.
The orange building.
Yeah, the orange building in the middle. And you see out front there's cars parked in this area. They back straight out into the access road. There's no screening between that location where they come off the road and come onto the access road, and then there's no screening between the access road and connector road.
This also shows that this is just under 88 feet. Similar to our 65, 70.
Then there are, why don't you go to the next, and we'll talk about some other places that, this is the car wash, and you can see the front of their project has no screening between the access road and the service road, nor any screening between the service road and connector road. This is the VFW. Their parking lot is configured a little bit differently. It is up here, but there's no screening for their vehicular access out of their parking lot onto the connector road or their portion of the service road that comes out of their property. Clayton Homes is basically open across the front, no screening in that area, no screening to the access road, no screening to the connector road. I think that is another view of Pepe's.
Up in front of Lowe's, I think that's the Liquor Mart and Jimmy John's at Retail Center.
So it is, the condition of placing some sort of vehicular access screening on our property between the front entrance of the front of our property and the connector road is a condition which has not been imposed upon other users in the immediate vicinity. We are proposing and plan to do a significant amount of landscaping in the front to provide the necessary vehicular access easement across the front of our property, which should, and given the relatively limited amount of vehicular traffic that we have, it makes sense that a variance could be granted for this particular requirement, especially since we are providing the VUA screening for the connector road, which a lot of the other developments in the area haven't been imposed on them.
Any questions for Attorney Sims?
I got a question for Matt. Is what Harold saying is, I mean, were you proposing both screenings? I didn't get that from your, were you proposing a screening between Connector Road and the access road and between the property and access road?
No.
Okay.
If typically, let me go back a couple. So I can talk about at least these two properties down here. This one's a little bit easier to see. Typically, what you'll see is we require screening. Well, that one's not actually there. Neither of these are all that close. Typically, there's screening in this area, roughly here. It screens the parking lot area from the road, not blocks it entirely. It softens the view. It kind of prevents headlights from shining into the road. Both of these properties here adjoining to them had appropriate screening shown on their final development plans. Neither of them, received variances at the time of Planning Commission approval. I can't speak for why the landscaping is either reduced or not present right now. So that, I guess, if that helps to answer your question, really the purpose of the screening is to screen the parking lot from, in this case, the private access road. It's basically, if there wasn't a private access road, if it was just the parking lot and then connector road, the screening would screen the parking lot from connector road. It just screens it from the closest adjacent access road, whether that's public or private.
So does it really make any difference to you whether which location it's in? I mean, you'd rather have it on between the property and the access road, but if it's between the access road and the connector road, is that acceptable also, like it's shown?
I mean, obviously, it's always more ideal for it to follow the regs. In this instance, it is better if it can screen from the next adjacent road.
Mr. Sims, why wouldn't?
If this is a relatively low traveled road, I could potentially be okay with it in the location that they're showing.
So
I don't have any traffic counts for an access road.
Why would your clients be opposed to moving that hedge back on the other side of the road, or is there?
There's no room. There's no room.
I think it's probably.
Matt,
There's no room.
did you say that the adjacent owners were required to have it, but I didn't actually put it in? Is that what I understood you to say?
No, my understanding is that they likely did put it in. It was shown on their final development plan, and typical operating procedure for our department is if it's shown on the final development plan, it has to be there. Otherwise, they don't get a CO.
But you say it's not there now.
It's not there now. So
I think one
some
of the
point
property
between
owners wants to speak
when they were
about that.
developed
Oh, Greg,
and now the landscaping was removed. That does happen sometimes.
We just didn't make them do what we said they had to do.
Well, we did make them do it initially. It's just at some point between then and now
Didn't actually
they removed it.
Oh, they removed it later.
Mr. Johnson,
or
would you
it
like to,
died.
Matt, let Mr. Johnson
Talk
speak
on
maybe
one
to that?
issue. I want to talk about other things too,
Oh.
but we bought the car wash third hand. It was built by a guy named Rodney Mason, who was a Toyota employee back in 2006. The bank took it after that, and we bought it in 2010, and there was no landscaping there. So we apologize for that. We didn't know we were supposed to have it there. We just spent $10,000 last year landscaping our site. We pulled out all the old stuff that was there and put all brand new in, trying to make it as pretty as we can. But we didn't have anything to do with that. That's the way it was when we bought it.
Thank you. Anybody else want to speak?
Just real quick.
Sure.
Just as to clarify the difficulty or the reason we've proposed the landscaping here in lieu of here, there simply isn't enough room. We can put a few shrubs here in this landscape island, but we've got some limitations back here. We're carrying not only our water and the north neighbor and the south neighbor, but everybody upstream. We're carrying all that water, so this detention pond limits how far back we can push our buildings. So it's pushed them a little bit more forward. So that's why we've kind of moved this up towards the front.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I wanted to get back to one thing on the cemetery I forgot to mention. When we did that dig, it was determined by not only the coroner, but the undertaker and the grave digger that it was just one burial site that was on our site.
Any other questions? Anybody else here that is sworn in that wants to speak against or, Mrs. Offit, please.
I am Jane Allen Offit, and I guess it was 2006 when the site was first sold.
I think we talked about a plat in '07. There was a cemetery site on that plat.
Well, there should be records of a hearing the Planning and Zoning Commission had, and I attended, along with my daughter, who was living in Scott County at the time, on another farm on Newtown Pike. Dr. Offit and I live at 3790 Paris Pike. But what happened here was, at that hearing on the site, the Heritage Commission was here from the state of Kentucky, and they were the ones who had notified either the Planning Commission or however that works governmentally, that there was a Webb family cemetery there. The Webbs lived in a home, Maplewood Farm, and they owned all that land down to the Connector Road. They were all Offits and Fords and Webbs up and down Oxford Road from the Connector Road to Newtown Pike. So what happened was, at that hearing, as I said, we were there along with another lovely lady, Mrs. Webb from Lexington, but she's since died. And so she was, very upset about it, but we were told at the hearing that that nothing could really, the developer was there. I don't even remember his name, who was selling those lots. But anyway, we were pretty much told that there was nothing that could be done about it. And I have to tell you, with my history in Scott County before the Planning and Zoning Commission, I just decided not to make a brouhaha out of this. So that's what happened. Then I was never notified in 2017 when Mr. Braxton's firm first proposed a development. No one ever notified me, okay, or Dr. Offit. He couldn't be here tonight. So we didn't know about it. This time Greg Johnson did call me, and he said, I understand you all have some relatives buried there. Now, what I've brought with me tonight, which you can just attach to your minutes or throw away, are the portraits and history. My goodness, everybody had a pen up here, of the people, the Webbs. They're all hanging in our house. If any of you ever want to come see them, I've put my address and information in here. But there are many Webbs, 6 or 7 Webbs that were buried at that site. All this happened, and my husband's grandmother, Mrs. William Nelson Offit III, lived in Lexington, but she owned considerable farms over here, and she had all the portraits hanging at her home. They had previously hung at Elmwood, where Cecil Bell lives now, but Dr. Offit III, who was my Dr. Offit's father, sold Elmwood to Cecil Bell in 1958. But all these portraits had hung at Elmwood. They stayed in our family, and we have them all now. I don't know what the proposal, it's not just a few bones of nobody that anybody knows. Bobby Hall Smith owned this land at one time, and he's the one who desecrated the cemetery. And I guess because he was a lawyer and a judge, he got away with a lot in Scott County, according to the history books. Well, he removed the major tombstones from the Webb Cemetery at the time. There's one on a farm out at Galloway Pike that I've seen myself. I've been called about it. It's by the swimming pool out there at what used to be Dr. Ellis's riding school, and several other in the area where evidently Bobby Hall, Judge Smith, just hired someone to go throw away all the tombstones so that nobody would know what he was doing when he started developing this land. Now, you and I all know that some people have always been able to get away with these things in Kentucky, but there have always been laws about it. So, as I said, I know it's Valentine's Day, and you all want to get home, and I don't want to keep everybody here, and I don't want to be so argumentative about this, except that it does matter to my husband and my family. As I said, we live on Paris Pike. Our son, King Offutt, lives across the road from us on land that we also have. And so we're probably going to be around here for a while. I don't know. But anyway, I just wanted to say this to you because whatever the statutes are, I support what you decide. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Offutt, for the history lesson.
I do have one question.
Mrs. Offutt, we've got Mr. Smith has a question for you.
Yes, sir.
Would you like for those graves to be relocated to your property?
Well,
or-
I really would. I said that at the time when we had this little hearing, and I'm surprised there are no planning and zoning minutes of it because someone from the planning commission was there. I just don't remember who. I know Charlie was not there.
We discussed
We have
this.
a lot of history, but I don't think he was there. We've probably been here longer than anybody in the room, Charlie.
Oh,
You
I'm
and Bruce,
sure you're
you
right.
and Bruce Langford and myself. So anyway, if you want this information, I have it. If
Please give it to
Okay.
Joe Kaner.
Thank you.
Mrs. Offutt, at the recent meeting here a few months ago, we did talk about I thought it was 07, but it could be 06, plat that did clearly show a cemetery.
Right.
Then we did discuss also, and if my memory serves me right, in 17, when this plat was originally approved for the current owners, there was no cemetery on that, which we didn't even ever discuss
It happens.
back in 2017, which was also a different engineering firm.
Well, it happens, you
And
know.
I think there was an oversight.
As I said, I'm not.
We appreciate
here
all the
causing
information.
problems,
It's
but
some good history. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Mr. Lusby, please.
I'm David Lusby. I'm one of the property owners of the car wash, and I want to relay to Dr. Offutt and Ms. Offutt that if we can work something out, we wouldn't mind to relocate what remains have been found on the adjacent property over to our property to keep the family together. I can't imagine separating a family.
Right.
Or if you all see fit or someone sees fit to relocate the whole family together to the Offutt farm or to another farm, we'd certainly give rights or an easement for that. So we would be glad to work
Thank you,
with
Mr. Lusby.
anyone. I also want to address Mr. Wiseman's concern about the landscaping. Greg Johnson said that we took over this piece of property. It had failed. The bank had foreclosed on it. We came in, we cleaned it up. We've planted additional landscaping. I don't want you to think that we've taken out anything that we shouldn't have taken out. We hired Pratt's Lawn and Landscaping to come in. They did an engineering or an architectural plan to lay out additional landscaping just this past year. And Greg's conservative. He said we spent $10,000. We spent more than $10,000, and we're still making upgrades in terms of landscaping. That's something that we hold dear, and we'll continue to improve. And there's some additional things that I may say later, but I just want to let Ms. Offutt know that.
Thank you, Mr. Lusby. Any questions for Mr. Lusby, or anybody else would like to speak against or for this application? Mr. Johnson, please.
Happy Valentine's Day. I hope you're all
Thank
in less
you.
trouble than me. I tried to get.
I'm in trouble.
I tried to
It
get her
don't
to come
matter.
with me, but she said some things that I probably shouldn't repeat. You all talking about being here for a long time. Bruce Langford was at the very first Planning Commission meeting in 1970. And I came in here, Toyota announced in 1985, December, and I came here and opened Thoroughbred Engineering with Brent Combs in February of 86. I was 28 years old, and we came in here. At that time, Charlie, of course, was here. The staff was made up of one guy, Steve Mooney. He only worked part-time. He was the secretary and the landscape architect and the engineer and everything. It was amazing. But at that time in history, there was a big contingent of Georgetown and Scott County who thought that the Planning Commission should not even exist. They said, we don't even want a Planning Commission. We don't want anybody telling us what to do with their property. Mr. Stone remembers probably those days too. And And so there were three arguments that justified the existence of this body and that the people who were naysayers could not argue with. And they were, the first one was health and safety. Health and safety. They said without a planning commission, we can't assure the public safety. And we need to be able to do that. That's part of the function of government, and so health and safety. Number two was the beautification of our city. And the Planning Commission has come up with sign ordinances and landscape ordinances to try to make our city as pretty as we can make it. And the third one, and these are all codified in the subdivision regulations, in the zoning ordinances, in the landscape ordinance, and in the sign ordinance, and in the comprehensive plan. The third one was to maintain property values. One of the biggest arguments we had against the naysayers is we said, if somebody comes into your property next door and wants to put a junkyard in, no one can stop them. And you can have your property value destroyed. So those were the three fundamental pieces of why this body even existed. And I believe that this development plan violates all three of them. What they've done is they've tried their best to cram as much property, much development onto this property as is possible. And they've done it. They've done it. But as a result, their development spills out into the access road. Spills out. And one of the things that it specifically says is that you're supposed to keep your development internal. So when people come to this place, they're going to be out on the connector road. When they go to the office, if it's cold like it has been this week, or if it's raining, or if it's hot, or even if it's not, when you come to the office to rent a unit, where are you going to park? If you've got a U-Haul truck, where are you going to park? I find it hard to believe that anybody is going to park 250 feet away and then walk down to the office. I mean, it just seems a little bit unreasonable to me. You can set it right there. So this access road is very important to the people on this road. There's 5 people on this road. Brexton's one of them. The other 4 are here. Well, 3 of them are here, but Miss Jewel Mead was here last time and expressed grave concerns. Mr. Jim Woodrum is here representing the VFW, and we're against it. And Rob and Tuesday Anderson are very concerned about what happens on this road. It's not the number of cars, it's the nature of the cars. It's trucks, it's cars with trailers, it's tractor trailers, it's U-Hauls. Those people are going to be parking out on this road. So you can see here, can I go over here and still be recorded now? So what we did was we showed a couple of different size vehicles. Here's just a pickup truck. Even to pull up to the office, they're going to be, half the truck's going to be out in the road. And if they come out here further, they're going to park completely in the road. No amount of signage is going to stop this. You can go to Kroger, right there where they've got all the hash marks says no parking, people park there. Here's a 26-foot U-Haul, very common U-Haul. It will literally extend all the way across the road. There's 19 doors right here. They'll open up this way to the access road. When somebody's going to be going in here, loading their stuff, where are they going to park? They're going to park on the access road. I can tell you right now where they're going to park. They're going to park as close as they can. If they've got a tractor trailer or a U-Haul or even a trailer or even a truck bed full of stuff and they want to put it in their unit, they're going to park right here. That's a problem for us. That is a serious problem. We don't even have a tractor trailer, and tractor trailers come in here. So what happens when a tractor trailer comes in here? He comes like this and he backs up to his unit and he might be there for hours unloading. This plan is much worse from our perspective than even the old plan was, which we thought was horrible. I thought that the Planning Commission staff showed great wisdom in placing condition number 7 on the development plan because they saw what negative impact this development was going to have on our road. Normally, you set back from the right-of-way or the access easement 50 feet. Okay, now they're setting back 50 feet from the connector road, but they're setting back from the access road 0. They are on the thing, they're sitting out 2.5 feet now, and then in the back, they're almost on the line. They have jammed as much development into this little bitty piece of property as they possibly can, and it spills out on us. And, you know, I don't know what else to say about that, except for that it's unsafe, it's unfair. You know, our people come and get on our lot that are going there. And the same thing for the dentist and the same thing for the DFW. They go onto their lot. And I can promise you when the convention center is redeveloped, Robin Tuesday's property, you're all not gonna let them park on the access road. It's just not gonna happen. And so this is a horrible plan for us, much worse than before. When the office was down here, at least the cars could come in and park off the road. You know, they could have done away with some of these buildings and created some more parking. There's a lot of things that they could have done to make this property functional with the old. Even better than this one. This one's much worse for us. So then, the next one was beautification of our city. Matt, could you go back to that picture of the building? It's back about 6 slides, I think.
With the ladder.
That one. That's what we're going to look at. That's the entire length of our property line from the access road all the way to the interstate. And that's not quite what Rob's going to see. Because on Rob's side, they have to build a retaining wall and put that building on top of a retaining wall. He's going to see a 13 or 14 foot tall building. That's it. Beautification of our city? Seriously? I mean, there's no landscaping proposed here. There's no windows. There's no architectural features whatsoever. And that can't be positive for us. They just can't be. And it can't be positive for the city of Georgetown, frankly. One of the main reasons that we're here, because we're trying to beautify our city. And if anybody thinks that that is what is a nice view on both sides of the property, literally from west to east, from the interstate to the access road, that's what you're going to be seeing. On the front, there's 19 garage doors, and people are going to be pulling out, in and out. Right here, there's about 9, I can't quite figure it out, but about 9 doors here that are outside the gate. So if somebody pulls in here and somebody's in here loading, they can't even get into the facility. If you bring your U-Haul truck and set it right here, they're blocking the gate. That's not a plan. That's not a good plan. This is the only way in. This is in, this is out.
5 feet, don't it, Stephen?
So I can't think of any place, and I thought it was great that they brought up Pepe's. Okay, Pepe's, we pulled the plan from Pepe's. Pepe's doesn't show that parking. We actually have here.
They did. Yeah.
Pepe's didn't show that
They
parking.
did it illegally.
They put that parking in, I think, and I'm just guessing, I don't want to throw Pepe's under the bus. That parking that they showed, that's been put in afterwards. And I'm just guessing that it never got approved from the planning commission. Does anybody know?
I've not seen a plan to add parking.
Well, here's the plan. And there is no parking there.
Well, I've seen this one. I haven't seen any plan to add parking.
Right. So for them to say, oh, look, Pepe's did it, they did it without permission. So, my point is that to be able to say, look, we can do it because Pepe's is doing it. They've never gotten permission to do it either. And I can't think of another place where we have done it. Frankly, before we had a planning commission at all, which was in the 70s, the only place I can think of where this type of a situation has happened is North Broadway. You got Moses's, Minute Mart, Friend Tractor, and you can pull off anywhere. But even that is superior to what they have here. Because if you want to get a delivery to Moses's or Easy Car, I think it's called, or something like that, you can pull off the road. Minute Mart certainly has an area for drive aisle and then parking. But the entrance is the entire width of the property. And those all happened before we were all here. So all of those things are very important to us. Visibility is one of the major things for the car wash. For those of you that weren't here in November of 17, they did gain approval, but I want to tell you how they gained approval. The staff recommended that the plan be denied. And they denied it because they recommended that in part because of the access road and how they were utilizing it. That meeting went on till something like midnight, maybe a little bit later. I think it's 1 o'clock. And many of the people that I've talked to.
Keep in mind it's Valentine's Day, so we don't want to go to 1 o'clock.
I got you. No one really remembered doing the vote. I mean, Charlie was like, I don't even remember doing this. So, but the vote was 3-2, I believe. The video's cut off, but it was 3-2, so it was a split vote even at that point. And so they did gain approval, but it was by the slimmest of margins and without the commitment from staff.
Some people didn't know what they were voting on, I don't think. They were too tired.
They're too tired. Can I look real quickly at the landscape slide? That one. Oh, no, that wasn't it. Next one. Yeah, that one. So it says specifically, it says the VUA is required to be screened from public or private street right-of-way, access road, or service road. So they don't have enough room because they've crammed so much on this site. The reason they want to put it on the other side is because they can't put it on the other side. They got a building there. And so what they're going to do, they're just going to pull out there. And another thing is that one of the most important things to our car wash is visibility. And by putting it out here, only thing it does is it tends to even make our visibility worse. So I would implore you to look at this plan carefully. It's easy for you all to look at this plan and say, well, you're really, you got a unanimous consent of the people on the access road who are against this plan. And, they're just doing too much. And then they can put together a new plan, come back in and address some of the issues that we're concerned about. We're definitely concerned about safety. We're definitely concerned about the city. And we're definitely concerned about our property values.
Mr. Johnson, you weren't there Monday at the workshop, but if I'm not mistaken, your son was.
Yes.
And one of the things we discussed was potentially making that access road a city-dedicated road, bringing it up to specifications and within compliance of the city, and then dedicating it back to the city. And if I remember correctly, I think everybody was okay with that.
Well,
no?
Let me address it. We talked to Mr. Eddie Hightower, who's the city engineer, yesterday. Was it yesterday or the day before? One day this week. And we asked him specifically that question. And we said, we would like to dedicate this road at some point to the city. And his response was, he said, I doubt the city would want it at this time. But if this building is built to the easement, we'll never take it. We'll never take it. So that would preclude us from ever being able to dedicate this road. And I've been plowing it for the last 9 years. The cheese store plowed right in front of them. BFW plowed a little bit. We actually plowed their site for them. But we plowed that road every year for the last 9 years. I cut the grass on this site because I wanted the visibility to the car wash. I personally was out here cutting that grass, but where they're showing their landscaping for the last 9 years. And so for them to come in here and block our view and then continue to block our view with a variance on landscaping, which is clearly not where it's supposed to be, is unacceptable from our perspective. And I hope it is to yours too. I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Anybody have any questions for Mr. Johnson? Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Yes, Mr. Sims.
Chairman, members of the commission. Appreciate Mr. Johnson's history of the formation of the Planning Commission and how we've moved forward. And one of the hallmarks of planning and zoning is that this body makes decisions to satisfy these goals based upon adopted subdivision regulations and plans. And then within those plans are ways in which, based upon needs, or based upon certain conditions, that you can get variances. he makes a, we have requested a plan that seeks to use the good portion of our property. We were allowed to go by the regs. We could have gone lot line to lot line. That's what's allowed. That's what the subdivision plan allows. We listened to the concerns of some of the neighbors, and we moved ours in so we could make sure that we can maintain our property, maintain our construct our building, and gave them 2.5 feet that we didn't otherwise have to give. We looked at the landscaping area across the front. Others in the area, whether they were there and they're gone, or they were never there to begin with, the fact of the matter is that other people have developed their property in this area without landscaping on either side of the service road. We're simply thinking we're going to satisfy the objective of cutting down on the vehicular glare from our headlights as it hits the connector road. There's hardly anybody going to be on the connector road that on the service road that landscaping between our property and the service road would serve. The major point there is that we've got the landscaping all across the front. The Mr. Johnson's complaint about visibility is one that's particularly troublesome. When he built his property, when the car wash was built, whether they built it or somebody else built it, the requirements, the conditions, that there was a 0 lot line available, that there was a 50-foot setback from connector road, was applicable at that point. Somebody else chose to put the car wash in a depressed part of the back of their lot to where people can't see. That's why you can't look at this application, and you have to look at it from the standpoint of the regs, not the criteria of visibility. We're just building within what the subdivision regs allow, with possible exceptions for the variances that this body already looked at and approved previously. And we've shown justification for these variances. The notion that this project is somehow or another going to be an eyesore on the city of Georgetown doesn't really stand to reason. We have, you can look at the visibility issues. I'm going to ask Craig to go through the visibility argument, because I think some of their concerns don't add up in terms of what you see when you're driving down the road there. I'm going to Craig took these, so he's better able to address them.
So I just went on Google Earth and did a street view. So this first picture is probably the north end of like right at the property line of Clayton Homes and Rob Anderson's property. So if you look, there's all this landscaping that's currently existing, all these tall trees. What's that say right there, Melanie? Okay, there's a dark line there. It's kind of hard to see. But there's their car wash sign, well above the heights of the trees, very visible. So if we can flip to the next one. And you can barely see the buildings. I wouldn't know there's a car wash there. I'd know there's a building. So this is about halfway down Rob Anderson's property, still on Connector Road. We've got all these nice tall trees, and I believe that's their car wash sign behind. One of these is. It's kind of tucked behind the trees, so I have no idea what's there now, for sure. And all these trees go away in our development. And then finally, as I'm getting almost to there, you can again see the car wash sign nice and predominant. Yeah, that's out there. What's this note?
Buildings blocked by the trees and shrubs.
Yeah, right. Yeah, you can. I mean, you can barely tell that there's anything there, other than the nice sign. Yeah, and our building is half as high. And then as I get up and I pass our entrance and I'm getting towards our south end, there's this nice dumpster enclosure that the car wash property has that blocks the view of their building, and more so than our building would. Yeah, and that's just kind of a line of where our building would be. So I think visibility is already a big issue for them, and we're going to make it better, to be quite honest. We're going to have buildings that are shorter than those trees that's already blocking their sign, and give a nice view of that sign.
How tall will our buildings be?
It's just over 10 foot. At that property line, it'll be a 10-foot half inch, I believe, if I remember correctly.
Do you know what the maximum height allowed is in this zone?
I believe it's 6 stories. So we could have put a 6-story hotel up there, all along the front.
Will there be any architectural features at all on the face of this?
It's something we could consider.
Building?
Well, Craig, this is what front of the building looks like. I don't know if
That's
you
our,
guys
yeah.
can all see it.
That's our typical front entrance office. We have a little feature at the corner, small little office area.
And would there be any garage openings along the access road? I mean, would there be people?
There's one.
Or would there be in behind in the second row? I mean, in the second.
I'm not sure what you're talking.
Are there any openings on the front, is what he's
Yes,
trying
there
to say?
there are garage openings. Yeah, there are overhead
That
openings.
is a concern to me. I can see people backing up.
There's
to
going to be
that.
storage doors on the front side of the buildings?
Just one that you can get to, because the rest
I
are parked.
assumed that all the
and
doors would be in the
landscape.
I did
driveway
too.
and behind.
That's why we drew it this direction here, so they can, back in like this.
The landscaping will block it.
Yeah, staff asked us if we would bring this landscaping out to the edge of the road and back in, and we've agreed to do that.
See,
So there's
the
nobody's gonna be-
diagram that, I think it's Mr. Johnson, it looks like there's vehicles backing up into doors off the access road?
Yeah.
No,
But you just said there are access doors onto access
that
road.
doesn't mean they're backing into and out of them. We've got a sidewalk. They can park in the parking spaces out front.
Yeah, but I'm not backing my pickup truck into the door and make it from
Well,
here to here when
See
I'm
the
unloading.
orange dash line? That's all landscaping, and it'll have some shrubs and stuff like that. I'm pretty sure they won't be driving through that.
Yeah, they won't, of course they won't.
Landscaping
Right.
on the north.
But the
And then we got
openings
this
there with
landscape.
that blue little line, there is a few doors there.
There is a few doors there.
And
that
again, I'm
somebody
gonna
could-
back into it. That's me, pickup truck, 26-foot U-Haul, it doesn't matter. I'm backing that truck as close as I get to that door. I sure am not
Well,
gonna park it
that's-
parallel to the
that's the
access
reason.
road and then walk it 50 feet to my storage unit. I'd back it right up into that door and have my wife pushing it out at me as quick as she could.
Mm-hmm.
Why
Well-
would we ever have any access doors facing the access road? Because then you've just basically
I
you've
assumed that was just parking
yeah.
for the office.
Yeah. Well, there's a parking spot here, so. Handicap, that's correct. So we put that as close as we could to the office. And there's maybe 2 or 3 doors in here between the parking spots.
And then parking on the north and landscaping.
And then, we've got parking and landscaping here at the north.
All right, thank you.
So are
And
there
just to
also,
and to clarify, we get 4 to 6 cars on average per day.
Right.
And of those 4 to 6, maybe 1 goes to the office. All of our storage facilities use what's called a no-key system. So if you've got a smartphone or a laptop, you can rent it at your house, come in, and you've already got a code, you punch in your code, you go to your unit, and done, and you never see the office. And probably anywhere from 60 to 80% of our rentals are done that way, all online.
I had one other question.
Yeah, so once you rented it, you're going straight into whichever one you picked.
I had another question for you.
Mm-hmm.
Did Brexton consider it desirable to hopefully someday have this access road become a city dedicated street?
We've not given it any thought at this point. The first we heard about it was
Probably Monday.
Probably Monday.
'Cause that's when I heard
Yeah,
about it.
and, you know, the city engineer
I mean, it
didn't
would
show any
concern me
interest
if
in
the-
having it, because they don't want any more roads to plow.
It would concern me if the city engineer said that,
They would never take it.
we'd probably never take it if you're gonna build it that close.
We also had a meeting with High Power this week and addressed that issue with him, and we received a much different reply. He said that there will never be a city street here. We're not going to accept it. The city doesn't want to maintain it. It's not, and he said, if you come and you improve it, but he had an opportunity to say to us what Greg says he said to him, and those words didn't come out of his mouth. He just said, we're not going to put a city street in there. Those were his words. He didn't put any qualifiers on it. He made it very certain. Craig was with me. He heard the same thing.
Yep. Yep. Yeah.
Any other questions for the applicant?
Craig,
Mr. Mifflin?
Building A, so there will be access to that from both sides?
There will be, yes.
Okay.
And this building is fully climate controlled.
Yeah.
So it's not usually people pulling in and parking their cars. It's more furniture, antiques, things like that they want to make sure is kept at.
How many of
proper
these
temperatures.
buildings are climate controlled?
Just A.
Just A.
Yeah,
Oh,
so
just A.
it's got some interior corridors
Okay.
and things like that.
Anybody else have any questions? I know we can
Just-
go on and on and on.
Just-
Clarification, the setback on the front is 50 feet.
We're another
65
15 feet.
I'm going to touch on that a little bit. I want to make scene. It's hopefully we're wrapping this up soon. So I looked at single-story self-storage buildings and the industrial standards right before I got here, and I scrambled trying to find as much information as I could because I feel like we're cramming a lot of building into a lot of space, in a little space. So we've got 2.79 acres, and I love math, so follow me, and for the record, you may have to go back and verify my numbers. An acre is 43,560 square feet per acre. If you multiply that by 2.79 acres, which is what this property is, it comes out to 121,488 square feet. I took out the 50-foot setback, which I did 50 foot by, I think it was 315 foot long, which is about 15,750 feet. So I deducted that. Well, let me read this to you. For single-story self-storage buildings, which I think this is, it says anticipate 30 to 38% building coverage. This is the industry standard. This rule of thumb provides approximately 13,000 to 16,000 square feet of storage per acre. I'll give you the benefit and give you 16. It's 16,000 square feet per acre. Deducting that 15,000 square foot, based on industry standards, that would be about 31,721 square foot, and that's based on 30%. It's a 40,180 square foot, that's based on 38% coverage. You're proposing 51,000 square foot of building space, which is almost 50% coverage of the land. I think you've got too much building for your land.
Where you got
That's the industry standard.
Right. And did that industry standard also exclude setbacks and all of that?
I'll read it to you what it says, and again, I only probably did this all within an hour. 30 to 38% building coverage. Rule of thumb provides approximately 13 to 16,000 square foot of storage per acre. The ideal site would consist of narrow buildings with driveways so that all units face the outside of the drive-up access. Customers always prefer to be able to drive up to their own unit, hence I talk backing up into it. The problem this creates is that this burns up a lot of land that you only get about 30 to 38% coverage. Most people and companies can't afford to build this way anymore, and that's the issue that you have. So based on the industry standards, and I just pulled this off the internet, so it must be true. You're based on the square footage that I see, it's 31 to 40,000, and we're putting 51,000 a building on 2.79 acres, and that excludes that easement. Now, what does concern me, as we talked about the road, you are right on that access road. I mean,
We're
there's
15
15
feet
feet from the edge of the easement or setback to the closest corner of your building, which happens to be the office. To their point, I mean, you pull up a car, you can't get the car. The closest place you can pull into is about halfway on your property. Yeah, on the other side of handicap, I don't have a handicap sticker in my car, Mr. Mithorn.
Yeah, exactly.
When there's no parking there.
Right,
So their
there's no
parking
parking.
it's already clearly defined.
So I'll rest
And
my
again-
statement, and then I'll let you do what you want to do. I was at a funeral this past Friday in Chicago, and I went and visited my grandma. Well, actually, all my grandparents who are all gone. And to Mrs. Offit's point, you know, I definitely don't want to see those families separated, so I would definitely recommend you and your neighbors come to an agreement, get all those graves relocated. That'd be wonderful. And if Mrs. Offit, would take those remains and mark them on her property, I think that'd be great. Actually am disappointed in 2017 when we did approve this, there was no graves on that plan, and I know we never talked about graves ever.
Well, we had our civil
I know
engineer
that
do
same
an
engineer
alter,
though that did your proposal in 17 was also the same engineer, if I'm not mistaken, who also had it in the file in 07 or 06. So guess what?
That's why
Shame
we
on
haven't-
them.
That's
I hear
one of
you.
the reasons we have a new
I hear
engineer.
you. So, you know, we got no cemetery. And what I'm a little disappointed is, and I'm not sure how, why, who, but Mrs. Offit said in 06 or 07, Heritage Foundation had records of the graves being there, yet in a few months back, you told us you had no Heritage Foundation records, you had no sonar records, everything was clear, there was no cemetery there at 60 inches. Well, guess what? 63 inches, we started to find some bones.
Yeah.
I just think that's kind of inconvenient.
Well, I spoke directly with.
So we got
Amanda
cemetery,
Higgins.
we got headstones. I think we're cramming too much too many buildings, and with the 2.5-foot easement, I think that's a perfect example of why we're cramming too much buildings. The sidewalks, we need sidewalks, I'm sorry. And that 50-foot setback from connector, and not from the access road, but connector road, is just too far and too close to the road, because if you ever want to dedicate that road per I think it was the city engineer, they'll never take that road if you put it 12 feet or 20 feet from the access road.
Well, and I think if us and our neighbors got together and evaluated the cost to bring that up to city standards, we'd all look at each other and say, I'm not spending that.
Probably, because that's going to be probably
I know
fairly
how much
expensive.
it costs to build roads.
'Cause it's not a very fancy road right now, I
It
know
would be
it.
very hard to convince me to spend that kind of money just to.
So that's all I have to say, is my biggest point is it's 50% usage of the buildable area, and based on industry standard, it's 12 to 20% over what the industry standards are. Yeah, but I took the easement off. Or no setback.
Your math did not answer Craig's question about whether your math took into consideration the setback areas.
It did not. So if I add the setback areas in and allow you to include that, it would be 36,446 at 30%. It'd be 38% would be 46,165. So still about 5,000 square foot over the industry standards. So still well below what you all are recommending. And that's with the setbacks added.
And my comment with respect to what this board must make its decision on is based upon our subdivision development regulations. We have the right to build to the lot line. That's what's allowed, and we've conceded in not doing that. We give up our site gives up a tremendous amount of land to a public retention basin, and so we've moved our project up to make it work. We're accommodating the drainage for this entire area. We have added landscaping in the front. It's going to be a grassed area with plantings in it. The idea that somebody's going to cavalierly just back their truck over top of grass and bushes is nonsensical, in my opinion. We've done a noble job of getting the property, making that area a defined entrance. We're seeking a variance on 71 feet when it was previously approved at 316 feet. We are 65 feet behind, from the front of our property, and the setback is 50. You're imposing standards on us that this community hasn't adopted yet. And we think that the project, it satisfies this. The speculation about what it will look like is just, you've got somebody telling you they don't like this wall. Without even seeing what our project looks like. I think it's a plan that satisfies the development regulations. We've asked for variances that are reasonable, justified, and this project has been given ample consideration. And I think we should be approved based upon the existing regulations.
Mr. Sims, though, this is to Charlie's point, 0 lot lines, while they're accepted at a B2 standard, it makes sense when it's the same owner with several lots and they maybe have adjoining properties or whatever. But when you have two neighbors that don't like each other, it sure doesn't make sense to, even if they are friends, why would we allow a 0 lot line, which then cannot absolutely not be maintained without encroaching on your neighbor's property? And, today you may be friends, tomorrow you may not be. So to me, it makes a little more sense to do 0 lot property lines when it's the same owner. But to me, even if they get along, it doesn't really make a lot of sense.
Mr. Solsky, I'm not trying to be glib about this.
We're friends.
The 0 lot line doesn't have an asterisk on it if you're only if you're friends.
I hear you. I'm sure it doesn't.
If all parties,
And
all parties are agreeable.
we listen to the joining parties, and we've made a concession. We've demonstrated to you that we can build and maintain. I think it's to impose a standard on us about how you would like it to be. You need to maybe the staff needs to revisit that regulation and seek an amendment of it with some asterisks.
Maybe. Thank you, Mr. Sims. Sir?
Do you anticipate many U-Haul trucks or large 24, 28-foot trucks coming through this?
Well, I have them, again, Bill Geisen, Mr. Solsky, with all due respect.
Sure.
I don't think this commission should base its decision based upon industry standards that you researched on the internet for an hour. I know you're doing your job.
I can
and
do
you're
it
trying
longer
to
if you want.
trying
We
to
can continue
evaluate
this
that.
to next month.
But again, I think what's most important is that in November of 2017, this commission approved a very similar plan where the makeup of the buildings were similar. And by the own staff says that this plan is improved over the one that was submitted, a year plus that was approved a year plus ago. So I don't think that you can lose sight of the fact that a very similar plan that was well within the regulations, except for some minor variances, which were all approved, is with this one. Everything that Brexton is proposing is within the regulations, except for some minor variances. And according to the staff, is an improved plan over what was proposed previously. And Brexton has decided to go forward with this plan and bought the land based upon this commission's approval with the variances back in November of 2017. I want to address this setback issue, the 50-foot setback. The closest point is 65 feet. So the setback is even beyond what is set forth in regulations, because the closest point of their buildings is 65 feet. And I can tell you on behalf of Brexton, they own 8 other sites, and they will tell you tractor trailers do not pull up to their sites. So you're not going to see tractor trailers as was told to you at this sites. You may find a U-Haul, sure, but tractor trailers, based upon their history, and they've done this, again, on 8 different, they don't pull up to these sites. And then when people unload, they unload, they pull up next to their unit, and you can see the majority of these buildings, people will not be parking, they will be loading and unloading, not in parking spaces, but next to their facility. So again, on behalf of Brexton, we certainly urge you to approve this application. thank you for your consideration of it.
Thank you. There's several other people who haven't spoke, Mr. Langford being one of them. Come on up, Mr. Langford.
I'm not going to say much. It's all been said. And everything I've heard makes me say this. It's a bad plan. Too many variances. Not enough compliance. Not enough room for this building, for this plan. Not enough planning. Bad planning. The building's too large. The lot's too small. There's not enough side setback, even though it's 2.5 feet. There's not enough front yard setback. There are not enough parking spaces. The parking lot accommodations are not there. A bad plan. There's not enough landscaping. A bad plan. No consideration for the neighbors. A bad plan. Everything I hear is a bad plan. This is a bad plan. It's not workable, should not be approved for this property. That's unfortunate that they have it, but they do. That's what I've heard, and that's what I believe to be. I'm not going to keep you.
Thank you, Mr. Langford.
Short, Charlie.
Excellent, Bruce.
Anyone else like to speak against or for? Or?
I've got a comment or two.
Oh, do you want Mr. Anderson to speak
Go
first?
right ahead.
And then,
Go right ahead.
Thank you, Mr.
Go ahead,
Anderson.
Charles.
No, I'm good.
Hello, my name's Robert Anderson. I own the adjacent property to the parcel that they're recommending to get approved. I've seen about countless plans. This is the newest one. What, 6, 7, 8, honey? I've yet to see the schematics or the grade plan for the retention pond, the runoff stats that are going to be incorporated onto my parcel in the back of it. They have no idea. I've not seen the civil engineer grade plan. They need an easement in order to construct it. Now, when they get ready to construct it, are they going to bring that back to grade, or are they going to leave it? Those are just some of the mysteries that are boggling me. The tax base that this operation here is going to generate is minimal compared to what the devastation is going to be to my property once this is developed. The wall that they're proposing to build on my section will be 5 to 8 foot tall, and then I don't know what the stats are on the building itself. I've never seen a final schematic. Oh, you know, I'm not trying to run commerce off from Georgetown, but I want smart commerce. This is not smart. There's so many faults. You have a private access road that's going to be detrimental to the veterans up the road. It's going to be detrimental to Mr. Lusby and his operation at the car wash. And there's more tax base in that car wash generated per day than this will generate all year, probably. The signage, I don't know where they're going to put their sign. This is kind of off the beaten path. The signage they have in front of the dentist office right now needs to be addressed, gentlemen. It's too small. When you get ready to pull that on Connector Road from that access road, you'd have no visibility. So if we instill these bushes going up in front of their establishment, that's another danger. We don't need it. If you want to impose that on them, put it back on the other side of the road so there's visibility generated so you can get out safely there. I understand your means for that, and I applaud that. We want to make Georgetown smart. We want to make it green. We want to make it safe as well. And like I said, I've not seen a final plan say that has sold me. I'm not trying to run commerce up. I want smart commerce to come to Georgetown and it to be beautiful. This is not smart, gentlemen. I don't see any positives out of it for me. I don't see any positives for anybody that has to do commerce on that access road. So, I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Mr.
Happy
Anderson.
Valentine's Day, guys and girls. Have a great night.
Thank you, sir. Anybody else like to speak?
Just a quick rebuttal on that, Jeff Dietrich, civil engineer. The retaining wall along that, it's not even a retaining wall, it's an extended foundation. It's only gonna be about 2 feet in height along that edge of the property. These plans, these design plans have all been submitted to your engineer. They've all been approved once. The drainage plan has all been approved by your engineer once. All the statistics have been gone through. No issues with any of it. It's all been approved. I'm sorry that you haven't seen it. I'm sorry that wasn't shared with the neighbors at that point in time. But that's just a standard procedure, I believe.
All right, thank you. Anybody else want to speak? Any other questions? Mr. Mifflin, you had a question or a comment.
Yeah. To the representative of Braxton, I really appreciate the changes that you all have made, the 2.5 foot setback on the side, reconfiguring different things, the effort and monies that you've spent on the cemetery, and I commend you for all of that, and I really appreciate it. But I'm going to tell you, I really have a problem with this corner of the building. I realize that the regulations call for 50-foot setback off of the property line, but most properties don't have an access road running through it. And so the corner of that building sitting right on the access road really concerns me. That's tough. That's tough to swallow. It really is. And but I appreciate everything that Mr. Johnson brought out a little while ago. Most everything. But Greg, don't come in here lecturing us about the ugliness of a metal building on the side of their property when you've got those same things all over town. You drive from Kroger to Bojangles and you see metal buildings up there, and so you've got those, and they're your competitor. I understand that, but you've got metal buildings all over town too. So let's not degrade their beauty of Georgetown. Let's keep it civil here.
Thank
That's
you.
all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Mifflin. Anybody else want to speak?
Just real quick, just to address your point about the corner of our building being on the access road. It's not on the access road. It's 15 feet past the access road.
I understand. 15 feet isn't 50 feet.
Well, we have a 50-foot
What is that
building.
kick out? Is that a sidewalk on that corner? It looks like a round shaped long. I mean, it goes 100, almost.
That's the landscape
is that the
area.
landscape area, or is that a sidewalk? Yeah.
Yeah, we've, at staff request, we've added this landscape, and we're actually going to take it all the way out.
So that'd be more. Would it be grass?
This would be grass, some shrubs,
Okay.
things like that you can't drive over with the truck.
So it'll be 10 feet from the sidewalk, roughly the access road, because there's a sidewalk leading to the office.
Correct.
So for those three buildings down there closest to the office, where are people going to park to unload? Way up there.
Well, they won't unload. That's the office.
Or they'll come in, because this all has interior corridors, they come in and park behind. They come in through our back door and walk into the.
So they can access the front of the building through the back.
Yes.
Certain units, yes.
Yes.
Certain, not all. I'm sorry, the units that have the doors facing, yes, they would be parking up here and coming down.
But they clearly said there are front doors on this building. They've told us that.
Correct.
They've told you that. There's a lot of inconsistencies in all their stories.
Yeah, I didn't.
It is true.
That's a lie.
Well, that's a lie.
They'll have park here and
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Folks, I'm not going to say a whole lot, but I have to say something. There have been inconsistencies. Is there a cemetery there? They said there wasn't. We said there was, and we found out there was, right? They said the traffic count coming in is 4 or 5 cars a day. Well, we're in the storage business. We average 25 cars a day. That's not a big deal, but there's just one inconsistency after another. This plan went from a really, really bad plan to just a really bad plan. And we would ask, all of us would ask, for this not to be approved. There will be doors facing the access road. There will be people parking there. There's no question that's going to be blocked. Our visibility, Mr. Anderson and his wife's visibility is going to be impacted significantly. Those are the things that we're probably the most concerned with, as well as the access road. And I'm not going to say a whole lot more. If they can move the landscaping back to the other side and move their buildings back 50 feet or whatever the case may be, you've already nailed it. They're overdeveloping this site, okay? We're in this business. You all know that. We've never been in here once. There have been 4 other projects built in Georgetown, self-storage facilities. We've never come in and said one thing. There's even another one that's been proposed. We never came, there's 5, I guess. We've never been here. The only reason we're here is because of the negative impact that this is going to have on all of our property if it's built this way. We're not opposed to their business or what they're wanting to do. It's just how they're doing it. That's the problem. Please understand that. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I have to comment on Mr. Busby's characterization of my client. It's suggesting that they've been less than truthful with you, especially about the cemetery. We paid for a professional to do a survey for us. They indicated to us specifically that there was not. The first time we found out that there was a cemetery was in a meeting in December, and we've been dealing with it. We had no knowledge till Ms. Offutt's letter came, and when that came available, we immediately set about working with archaeologists, working with people. So I think Mr. Lusby's characterization of my client as having tried to mislead this body is certainly incorrect, and I'm offended by it, and I hope that you do not believe that my client had any knowledge of a cemetery and tried to hide it. When we found out about it, we started to deal with it. We started to deal with it respectfully and according to the law. To suggest otherwise is making it up and trying to create fear and for you all to work against us. And I don't think that my client has acted in that way at all. Once again, the screen area in the front, where we're going to have landscaping they're not going to drive over. It'll be clear. Well, it'll be clearly marked that you can't unload by backing up into those facilities. If it takes, we will have it as marked, striped, whatever it takes. People may not abide by it, but we're certainly going to not make it conducive for them to do that. We're going to try to put up obstacles to them backing in there, and we're going to make sure that it's not welcome and will be addressed.
Thank you.
Would you be willing not to have any entrance doors along the front? I mean, if there are only three or four, why not just force everybody to come in through the back drive, and that way we won't have an issue with anybody backing up to the front.
I'm Melanie Willenberg with Brexton, and we'd be happy to comply with that and eliminate any
That would help a lot.
overhead doors from the front if that helps.
But in addition to that, I think anything we can do along that frontage
I
to
think
give
that'd
it
be
some
best.
architectural feel would.
If you want to answer the question, just approximately how far is the closest parking space to the office then, with all that green being put or landscape right there in front of the office door? How close, maybe not including the handicap spot, because I think that's still a long walk, is the closest spot to the front door?
It's about 130 feet.
Okay.
But
long walk.
60 to 80% of our customers rent online and never go into the office. They pay online, they rent online. So when they enter the facility, they enter through the entrance, which is the picture I showed earlier, and they drive right to their unit. And we will not allow any accessible doors on the front as an amendment to this application.
That would be best, I think.
Any other questions for the applicant? Anybody in the audience have anything?
I've got a question for staff, and anyone can take this question. It's just a common sense question. Can you go to the conditions of approval? List them outside.
Thank you.
So should additional considerations, now that it's known that there's a cemetery present on the site, be included in the conditions of approval?
I mean, it could be. I think my thinking in not including it was that regardless of whether or not we put it in the conditions of approval specifically, it wouldn't exempt the applicant from complying with all state, federal, and local regulations. So I guess that's why I didn't put it, because whether or not we specifically list it, they have to comply with it anyway.
Mr. Moran, from my research I've done on this from December to now, not only we are required to, we cannot build over top of this without making arrangement for appropriate leaving it and access to it, or going through the procedures that are required under KRS 381. So we have to deal with it. And that's why I understand Matt's reasoning for not making a condition. If it makes you feel better that it is a condition, we have to satisfy it. So if it's added to this, so be it. But we have to comply. It's not an issue for us. Moving forward over top of it would be a criminal penalty.
Okay, so
Thank you, Mr. Sim.
This would apply to conditions 1 and 2, correct? So
Yes.
Stormwater management
Yeah, I mean,
plan?
whether or not we have conditions 1 and 2 there, they have to comply with those as well. That's correct.
And just one more comment on the cemetery. We're happy to work with Ms. Offit to relocate remains to her farm.
Whatever she wishes.
And if the neighbors want to work with us and, relocate what's on their site, her farm, we'll work with them.
Thank you. Any other questions? Any other?
I had questions for the neighbors. Does not having any entrance doors along the access road, does that give you any reassurance, or you still feel very strongly that people will be parking
Well, obviously,
the wrong way?
we've not heard that, Greg Johnson. We've not heard that. That's a new thing. I'd like to know what the front of the building was going to look like. Is it just going to be a blank building with no doors or anything on it?
She did have a picture earlier.
Yeah, that was just at the office.
That was just the office.
That's just the office, that little.
Yeah.
But the whole,
No, that's from,
so that's the front of the building, going all the way the 200 and some odd feet. That's what the front of the building looks like looks like to me about 30 or 40 feet. So what about the rest of the building from the office north?
I think what Greg's asking is.
The length of the building.
We'll repeat that pattern all along.
Correct, yeah, I mean, this happens once, but this blue gets extended.
So it's just a flat building.
Blue or
Front of the
gray.
building. It's a very nice, we have a facility that looks just like this. It's a really very nice looking facility. If I'd known this was an issue, I would have brought more pictures of it.
Thank you.
We have, you all know, as Mr. Mifflin said, we have units too, but we have tractor trailers at least once or twice a week, moving vans that come in. I checked the month of December for our facility out by Kroger. We had 52 cars a day that went through the gate. Now, there was probably maybe that number again that came to the office. But many of them have trailers and U-Haul trucks, and they park right there. We have UPS delivers every day. FedEx comes every day, and there's no place to park them. So that's our biggest problem. I think that's the problem that Jim Woodrum has. He's here representing the VFW, and I don't think it's been. Did you all submit a letter?
Yeah, I was going to say for the record.
Yeah, there was
a
a letter.
letter that was submitted. If you, I mean, I can
For the record, everybody, it's the American Legion, not
American
the
Legion.
Thank
Sorry.
you.
I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
Mayor, there you go.
American Legion. I
So
drive by it every day.
American
You should know.
Legion did submit a letter. Just to sum it up, I mean, I can sum it up, or if you want, I can read it. Joe, what do you, or Charlie, should I read it?
Well, it's part of the record,
Oh,
whether
so
you read
it's
it
part
or
of the
not.
record. I'll read it real quick. American Legion, Scott Post 24 has been approached by Tri-Village Storage Development Group for our input in the development of the subject property. The other property owners have also been approached, or have approached us for our input as explained to the various groups impacted by the development of our primary concern is the access road that we share. For several years, we've been concerned about the intersection approach to Connector Road. This access road has no traffic control at the intersection of Connector Road, thus creating numerous traffic hazards. We've discussed this with the property owners and various governmental agencies, except Dr. Mead, who is a recent business, and everyone states that it's not their responsibility. We've been told that a highway use agreement must be developed by the various owners or access road taken over by the city. To date, neither has taken place. Tri-Village Storage Development informed us that their experience is that the Tri-Village Storage Development would only create additional 5 to 6 cars per day at that intersection. Our position is that one additional car per day will affect the safety of those traveling the access road and connector road at the intersection in question. It'd be our preference that the city assumes the access road's maintenance and safety control. However, Scott Post 24 is available to discuss our participation and involvement in a highway use agreement. We have looked at the original development plan. We have some of the same concerns, sight lines, easements, setbacks, etc. And as the adjacent property owners, however, those are issues between the other property owners and the Planning Commission, American Legion Executive Committee, and it looks like they've all signed it with the exception of Vice Chair Ramona Brock, but everybody else has signed it. So thank you, and we'll submit this into the record.
So it's not really the number of cars. It's not a lot of cars. Even the 52 is not that. It's the nature of the cars that we worry about. And there are big trucks. There are a lot of trucks and trailers, and that's what utilizes these types of facilities. And that's kind of my point, is that they're kind of using our access road for their parking lot. And that's the way we see it.
Thank you, Mr.
But they just said that they're not gonna have any doors on the access road.
They're still going to be, there's somebody going to be pulling up to that office. There's no place to park. There's no place to park. And if you got a U-Haul truck and you're moving in from Michigan or Chicago, and you want to get your unit, you're going to come up to the office. And what are you going to do? You're not going to know to pull around and park and then walk 300 feet or 250 feet back to the office. And then if you do that, you're blocking their entrance. So
It'd be just like any other storage unit, and you'll pull on through the gate, and you'll park off the road.
yeah, once you get inside, it's just the office itself is
But
what.
you'll pull on off the road.
And we moved our entrance gate up 60 feet, so that even if a tractor trailer showed up, they could pull completely off up to the gate.
Then that's my point. I mean, there are, just like any other storage unit, you'll pull off the road and pass the gate.
Right.
And we have very clear defined parking spaces out front.
Right.
So if somebody comes up to our up to our facility, will see very clearly marked parking spaces. No different than if I go into your place and I see parking spaces I pull into.
Do these aisleways look, I mean, do these seem like they would work to you, the 20 feet, and most of them are 20 to 22 feet? I'm trying to envision if a 24-foot truck goes down through there.
Yeah, we run
I think he's gonna have to pull in and back out.
We run simulators through.
They can make the turns and not.
I don't know about a full tractor trailer, probably not. If
No,
they
I
were
mean-
coming in, they would have to pull in, pass the gate, park, and deal with it.
How wide is a
And
U-Haul
that's
trailer, like a regular?
How wide?
8 feet.
8 feet.
It's 8 feet? Oh,
8 feet.
Okay.
Yeah.
Might be 102.
You can't pull.
So you'd have plenty of room. Everything I see is 20 feet or wider.
Yeah, but you can't pull.
Yeah.
You can't pull right against the
Code-
building.
code
You're gonna
requires
stay
that we
2
have-
feet
No,
off.
right, you gotta stay 2 feet off, but 2 feet off both sides plus 8, still only 12 feet. You still got plenty of
You gotta
room.
make the turn.
I hear you. It might be, it look like it could be tight.
It would be tight.
Again, we run simulators.
Right. You know more about that than I do. Mr.
Steve-
Anderson.
Steve, to answer your question a while ago, with that, the doors not being on the front of the building, wouldn't that be less conducive to traffic on the front of the access road? Yes, but it still doesn't address my concern down the bottom of the hill. It's
You've got a wall across.
right. And secondly, where I don't know where these guys would park if they pull up. You know, where are they going to park?
I don't really understand the self-storage. You say UPS and FedEx is coming up. Are people using those storage spaces now for businesses? Or?
Yes. Not very much. We have a lot of businesses that use our facility. I'm Greg Johnson, for the record. Yeah, we have a lot of businesses. There's Lexington Herald Leader comes in every day and drops papers off. We've got vending machine companies. We've got landscaping companies. We've got concrete companies. We've got insulation and painting companies. They come and get their scaffolding and their equipment. They're in there every day. So, yeah. And they would love to have these ones that are out front because that would keep them from having to go back into the facility to hook up with their trailer or whatever they're going to put inside.
Except the ones out front, she said would be the climate
right.
controlled, air conditioned. I'm assuming they would be much more expensive. But,
And again, we've already agreed that we wouldn't have front access. So
Right.
Right.
Yep.
Mr. Chairman, it seems like this access road is not an interstate. You know, people are not supposed to be going through there most of the time anyway. They're just, people stopping on it. It seems to me like it's not a serious problem. That's what it's there for. Stop temporarily. If they block it, or run the other way. I don't see that being a big issue.
My name is Sean Johnson. I'm actually Greg Johnson's son, but I'm also a partner in the car wash, and I obviously have concerns with that. I've been a manager at that car wash for 6 years, and then recently been able to turn it over to a very good manager. If you all have been by there, you've probably liked him. We certainly do. But I've been around many warehouses my entire life, basically. They built their first one when I was very young. In fact, I was homeschooled in the office for many years when they were first getting started. And I just wanted to bring this up here to kind of give an idea of what I believe through personally seeing things throughout my entire life, what would very possibly happen. So if this is the drive aisles that we have here, someone would pull into here, for example, with a truck or trailer. They can't park here because these are normal car spaces. And they're saying that there's 8 parking spaces, but a few of which are really far down, so I'm really only counting 5 with 1 handicap. But they would pull into here, park, and with the proposed grass strip, which I think is a good idea for the most part, but it also still poses a potential safety problem, would pull all the way up here to go into the office. Now you've got a truck and trailer parked on the street with their entrance here. How are you supposed to get into that entrance? You would have to either back down this service road or pull forward going out the other entrance where the American Legion is, which would cause even more problems. Not only is it a car, it's a car with a trailer, and then have to come all the way back around before you can enter into their unit.
What about pulling in there first?
Well, if you pull in here first, then they would be blocking the entry because they don't have necessarily a entryway or a gate code yet to get in because they don't have access inside here. That's the reason why there's a gate in the first place. So if you pull in here, then you'd have to walk 300 or so feet up there. Okay. In the meantime, they're blocking the gate. So now no one at all can get in there until they get their gate code and come in and that kind of thing.
Would it make more sense if that was the entrance at the office?
Well, possibly. I considered that as well. So if they switched it all up, then absolutely you could turn in this way. But there is another entrance down here at the American Legion, in which case you pull in the other way, the same exact problem happens. They pull into here, entrance is this way. Now they got to back up on the service road again to come into this direction here. So without having a parking lot off of the service road for them to have their truck and trailer or U-Haul or whatever they may have off of the service road, and this is a road that people drive on, not park on. There's really no good way to enter or exit into this area that I can see. And this is, again, just going through different, they say they have simulations of trying to pull around all these things. I can also tell you that A couple of my dad's storage units have very narrow areas. I believe they're closer to 22 feet or so, and they get beat up all the time. We are now, from my understanding, designing them to be more like 25 to 26 feet.
That's what I thought.
Right, so you actually get more space to be able to pull around. Now that's not what I was up here to talk about. I was mostly talking about the safety of going up and down here. And then one more thing on safety, even my employees of the car wash walk up and down Connector Road to go to the gas station to get something to drink or a snack or something. We have employees that live in those apartments just down the way, and they do walk up and down that road. If it is possible for us to upgrade this road to have sidewalks, the car wash, and I can speak on the full behalf of the car wash, we are fully capable, willing, and able to upgrade that road and donate it back to the city in the future. So we would be happy to do that, and it sounds to me like the American Legion would like to do something like that as well. I can't speak on behalf of them, but it sounds to me that they would.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Anybody else want to speak?
Just want to make sure, and thank you for your indulgence, that Mr. Mifflin has your question answered about the setback from the access road. The closest is the 15 feet. It widens as you get to the parking spots, and that's about 40 feet off the access road. So there is plenty of room there. And again, you have 5 to 7 cars a day, and 80% of those will not be bringing their truck to the facility that they're going to take it to their unit because they've already signed up online. I also have examples of other storage facilities in Georgetown related to the parking spaces. I think it's pretty typical for a storage facility to have 8 parking spaces is more than adequate.
Thank you. With no further questions, I need some kind of a motion.
My big concern is looking at these aisleways. If somebody's parked there, if they come in with if it's a Suburban with a small trailer behind it, when you got 20 feet, 21 feet, unless you pull up within a foot of the building, the person on the passenger side won't be able to get out the door. The vehicles are generally that vehicle's going to be 7 to 8 feet wide, especially if it's a U-Haul. Then even if you're within a foot, you're 9 feet. That leaves 11 feet for a person to get through with. An 8-foot vehicle, that's about 18 inches on either side. And with mirrors, you're going to hit mirrors, so that means if one person's parked here, nobody else can get in.
That's true with all of them. I have a storage facility. I run a storage facility. And when I'm loading or unloading, even if I'm parked parallel to them, other people can't get through.
Can't get through.
Yeah, when you got a door open there. It's just the nature of the beast. And somebody starts down there and they see a vehicle in line and they back up and go down the other aisle there. So,
this way it is at my storage unit. That's just the way they're designed.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not a highway. And if somebody has to wait a few minutes while they're unloading, it's no big deal. But yeah, you don't have to have two-way traffic through there 24 hours a day.
Just to address that, you go to Lowe's, Walmart, Home Depot, the drive aisle between the head-end parking is typically 20 feet. And I see trucks and trailers passing each other all the time. So I think it's adequate. The likelihood of 20 cars and trailers being in there at the same time is pretty small.
You mean it's a 20-foot
drive
road.
aisle. What's that?
It's 20-foot aisle.
20-foot aisle.
But there's not a wall on the right or left, is there?
Right, but there's cars parked and people pass each other. So
But you better not open your door while you're passing.
And their mirrors are over top of your cars. The mirrors stick out well beyond. Most tractor trailers are 8 feet wide, and then you put the mirrors on. They're 11
I've got a
feet
full-size truck that I drive through a 9-foot garage door every day when I get home.
So we need we've had a lot of discussion. It's already 8:30. I need some kind of motion.
I'd like to make a motion to approve.
We have a motion to approve by Mr. Caldwell.
With conditions?
with all the conditions, that's
An additional condition
That's 9 of them.
9 conditions.
that we need to add a condition that no openings will be onto the access road.
Right.
I believe they agreed to that already.
Oh, we still want to add it.
Right.
Wouldn't it be a good idea to add
Yeah,
it?
I think it would be a good idea to note that. in
Add
there.
it as number 9?
It's number 10.
10.
Or, we have a number 9?
It's, yeah, there's number
Yeah,
9 on
It's
the
already
thing.
up there.
Well, I know,
9 was the one they
Yeah.
add all the time.
It's sunset clause.
Gotcha. Thank you. So number 10. With no access facing doors. Okay. So I've got a motion by Mr. Caldwell
I second.
and a second by Mrs. Mizell. We'll do a roll call. So this would be in favor of the application to approve with all 10 conditions. Again, motion made by Mr. Caldwell, seconded by Mrs. Mizell. Mr. Wiseman,
Yes.
Mr. Moran,
Yes.
Mr. Mifflin,
Yes.
Mr. Stone,
No.
Mr. Caldwell,
Yes.
Mr. Smith,
I vote no, but it's mostly because of, I think the landscaping needs to be behind the access road, not in front of the access road, and
okay,
blocking
Mrs. Mizell,
Yes.
and the chair votes no. So it looks like it passes 5-3. Did I do that right? Yep, 5-3. Thank you. The applicant go up to Mr. Perkins there and sign. Next on the agenda is updates and previously approved projects. Do you want to discuss that
We
at
have
all?
no updates.
Okay. B on the agenda is executive committee vacancy. So we do have a vacancy.
Yeah. Sir.
Could you please take conversations out in the hallway? We still have more meetings to go. Thank you.
As far as the executive committee vacancy, I put that on there because Rob Jones left, and we're short a member. Frank had filled in, was appointed temporarily. Elections are next month. If Frank can serve until next month, I think we can get by until the regular election period if you just want to.
Do we want to talk about who wants to be what today
You're
for
welcome.
the election for
Yeah.
next month?
You're welcome to talk about it, or, point somebody, whatever you want to do.
I'd like to remain chair, or become chair, I guess, because technically I've been filling in. It's like, what'd you say?
I'd like to run for chair.
I'd like to run for chair, and does anybody else would like to run for chair?
I'd like for you to.
Thanks, Charlie. And then, of course, we need a vice chair.
What'd
So-
Charlie say? What'd you say?
I'd like for him to.
Thanks, I told him thank you.
I agree with that.
We will need a vice chair.
I'd be willing to run for vice chair.
So we've got myself as chair, potentially, Steve Smith as vice chair, and then we do need 2 more we've got 1 more executive. Jeff's on there now, right? No. Nope. Byron, you're on there, I'm sorry.
No, it's Byron, yeah.
Me and Steve
you,
currently
Byron,
executive.
and Frank temporarily until.
The question I have
until
is, I know
elections.
we've got to have county
City.
and city, so who is eligible to serve as the 4th?
Well, currently, you'd all be fine. So Steve is county, you're city, Byron city, and Frank is county. So,
Does
you're all
anybody else
fine
who
now,
is a
but-
county
but-
or county city joint appointment can also be on the executive committee if they want?
right.
Byron, do you still want to remain on there? Do you feel like you
We-
can make
we still
most
have
of the
a-
meetings?
We still have a replacement for Rob. though.
Right.
Well, yes. I mean, next month, if it were to remain as it is, with Byron on there, Mark on there, and Steve on there, and 1 replacement, it would have to be a county or a joint appointee.
So at
to
this
fill
point, who would be
Rob's spot.
eligible?
Regina, James, and Frank
Okay.
would be eligible to fill Rob's spot.
Byron, are you okay staying on there as well?
I'm okay with staying on there. Maybe the start time, some of the executive meetings, if we could.
Okay.
Try to push
I
it
think the
4:30
issue we've
hours
had
and
is
close it.
Byron can't, when we typically have the meetings, Byron can't make them because he's either working or he's on callback.
I don't have back hours.
So I think in the discussion next month, we'd have to decide on the meeting times. I mean, typically, we'd like to meet during office hours, which is 8:30 to 4:30. You know, it's, I can
Would it
meet
be
later,
a big
but,
inconvenience if we did push those to 4:30?
I mean,
It's generally right before the workshop, and the workshop starts at 4:30.
That's true. Yeah.
So question I have is, could we, or do we, and not to open up a can of worms, because you all may not like me for saying this, do we push the workshop to 5? So then if we do need to have executive committee, we could have it at 4:30. I hate to have too
that
late in the
that would be
afternoon
fine.
meetings, but-
I think the situation we run into is sometimes we need an emergency executive committee meeting. We have to call it at on short notice. So we can't always have them before workshop.
But we've
A lot of
gotten that
times.
pretty well until.
That's an emergency, right?
What is an emergency?
But that's an emergency.
Yeah, that's an emergency.
Well, most
but
of the time, I mean, it seems like, at least the 4 years I've been on here, is we've always called the meetings at 3:30.
yeah,
And so for you, Byron, I know that's not convenient at all.
I
3:30.
wouldn't say emergency. I would say when an applicant has something
So
that
that means you can't be on there.
desires to
Needs to be
take it to the
addressed.
executive committee, we don't want to wait 3 weeks if
That's
it's the
what-
first
that's what
week of the
I felt
month.
last time,
So
Rob.
it's not an
Right.
emergency
It's
necessarily.
like,
It's
no,
just,
you can't.
if we
So
want to,
Mrs. Mizell cannot make a 3:30 meeting. Frank and James, or if you either of you consider want to be on there, let us know next month. Elections aren't until next
I don't
month.
want to be on permanently. I could,
Oh, okay, so
Can we have more than 4 people on the executive committee in order? If we had 5, then
I don't think we can.
we
'cause it'd
could
be a
change the
quorum, right?
bylaws. I mean, that's the only way we could.
Because this is a
for the
standing
bylaw.
committee. So yes, you can have, I mean, you can literally have a standing committee of the whole commission, so.
Well, I
so
think
no,
that would
that's
make
not a
more
problem.
sense. That way, because if you don't have a quorum, you can't conduct any business. If you only have 2 people
What,
out of 4.
what you could conceivably do, Mr. Chairman, is to just simply have, well,
An
I
alternate.
believe our executive, our bylaws say it's 4 members. So we would have to amend our bylaws to add 1 or whatever.
But I think the issue that we may have with that, Steve, is let's say we say it's all of us, which would be, 9 of us, right? Normally, if there's 9, all 9 of them. If you open it up to 9, said, okay, everybody is on the executive
Yeah, but then
committee.
you gotta have a
That means you
quorum of
gotta have 5.
That's right.
Good luck getting 5 of us here.
No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying
Okay.
if we move it to 5, then you need 3 for a quorum. When we have 4, we need 3 for a quorum.
Yeah,
Oh, I
yeah, it
see
would not
what you're
change
saying.
quorum requirements from 4 to 5, that's true. But it would give you one more
But
person
it
to
would give
have a
us one
shot
more
at getting
person,
being
so
there.
this way you could have 2 going instead of.
You could,
Yeah.
2 people could be out of town, you can still conduct business because you got 3 people.
Because right now, you have 2 out of town, and
You can't do
You're dead in
anything.
the water.
You can't do dead, you're dead in
Yeah.
the water. I'm okay with that if you want. So what would we have to do, Charlie?
Change
to
the bylaws.
Change the bylaws?
Yeah, and I think we could write up, literally change one sentence.
But
and-
now here's a question I have. Is there 5 people on here who want to be on the executive committee? You got you and I. Byron said he'll be there. Frank said he'll do it temporarily, but he doesn't want to do it permanently.
We only need 3, but if 2 people, if one of the 2 people is available, then
It doesn't sound like, well, Byron wants to, so we've got 3 well, hopefully that would almost always show up. Frank doesn't want to do it permanently. Mr. Stone, would you be willing to do it?
I'll be available, put it that way.
So he'd be available. So we,
between Frank or James, one of them could probably make it.
there you go. There you go.
But we can have that language, Mr. Chair, we can have that language for next month. It just simply takes the motion and second. It doesn't take any special
Yeah, let's do that,
advertising or
Joe.
anything.
Maybe write it up. We could discuss it next month and probably vote on it. And if
Okay.
it's doable, let's do it. Mr. Mifflin's not eligible because he's city?
No, he wouldn't, if we write the bylaws to have
Well, that's right. If we-
5 members. Yes, he would.
If we're in the business of changing bylaws,
Yeah, if we're
we
going
make
to
some
change it to
adjustments.
5, and if Mr. Mifflin wants to and can serve on it, maybe open it up.
That way James would be, he serves both city and county anyhow, he's joint, so that
You
he'd
give a
be
good-
the perfect.
Good mix.
And we can always change that to at least 2 from county, at least 2 from city. And that way the 5th one can flip it.
go either
Or if
way.
it's a joint appointment, that satisfies either category anyway.
All right.
While we're talking about people on the commission, or about appointments.
Oh, yeah.
Is there anybody that will be rotating off soon, or I'm not sure what everybody's terms are.
I think there is one at the end of the year. I can't remember if it's Jeff. Jeff, or you? There's no member, expiring, whose term's expiring until December of this year, and I believe it's Jeff's.
And I just got reappointed by Tom.
January or February. Well, what about Rob's replacement? Do we know who that's going to be?
Rob,
Thanks for
that
asking.
replacement hasn't been made. A couple names have been thrown out there. But I believe the fiscal court is waiting for the names to be forwarded from Stamping Ground. So I think the next meeting, which is the third or fourth Thursday night, their night meeting, I think they'll probably make the appointment then. Which is like,
I talked to
not next Thursday, but Thursday after, I believe.
No, we don't have any more. Oh, the only other business we have is to vote on the audit.
Yeah, we need to vote to accept the audit. It was presented at Monday's workshop, Frank. There were no derogatory findings.
And he did send us that email that showed some of the comparisons. And as a banker, I liked it. I mean, it was a pretty good looking.
I move we accept the audit.
So we got a motion by Mr. Stone and a seconded by Mr. Wiseman. You spoke up quick enough, Frank. So all in favor to accept the audit for 2017-18 is presented, say aye. Aye. Anybody opposed? All right, so you've got the motion approved. Anything else? Time to go. Meeting adjourned?
I tell you, it was
All right, meeting
I talked to the guy
adjourned.
from the state today. They're gonna